Okay, I'm Tom. Thanks you all for coming. This is the first time I've done Pecha Kucha, so fail fast, fail often. So, like any good OLT project, we have an acronym and a logo. So that's ours, Engineering Across Cultures. That's what we renamed it after we got fed up with saying the full title. So there were quite a few people involved in this project. A few people at UOW, Elizabeth Lee, Pamela Abuda, lots of other universities, but this is what really kicked off the project, one of our graduate capability statements. And this blank screen is what I knew about this graduate capability starting off until I met Catherine Layton, who was instrumental in the project early on. So once we started looking into what this really meant, this happened. So can you all read that? No? Good, neither could we. There's a lot of stuff there. There's so many different definitions and explorations of what culture is, what intercultural competency is, what global competency is, and all different kinds of names. We kind of got a bit lost in it and weren't really sure where we were going to go next. It was a bit of a roadblock. So what we decided to do, first through ESDF funding and then later on through OLT funding, we decided to look at this problem through 4 different ways, which I'm going to talk about in a second, and that was really the way forward that we found. So the first one we looked at was to try and figure out what we're dealing with. We had made the assumption that students weren't interculturally competent to start with, which is a bit of a bold assumption. So we wanted to see what they knew and what issues we were going to encounter. So we developed a research process to try and understand this a little more and explore it a little more. We didn't really know what we were going to find, but we used surveys and observations and analysis of students' work. And in doing that, we came across a lot of different challenges in trying to understand what intercultural competency is and trying to avoid that culture as nationality trap that's very easy to fall into. So now, we still don't know very much about how to identify intercultural competency because of the challenges in identifying cultural differences and when there is actually a cross-cultural interaction rather than any kind of personality clash in small groups. So that's ongoing. The next step was to try and decide what we were going to target and what we could realistically achieve with our students as graduates. So we did this by exploring what had been done in the field of engineering education before, and we also worked with academics to come up with a couple of definitions of culture, intercultural competency, and the challenges students will face to go forward with. So this is what engineering academics understood about these and how their definitions played out. But we also found that Engineers Australia, the body that accredits all engineering programs, has all of these statements embedding all of these different elements which we identified in intercultural competency. So we sort of thought, why define a new target when we've already got one we're accredited by? So these were some of the terms we're now working with to develop further resources in the area. So speaking of resources, the next step was to develop something people could actually use to give them a step forward. It's one thing to define intercultural competency and have lots of diagrams and different things, different statements, but people need something concrete to work with to make a start. So this is the real gold in this project, what we've developed. It currently looks like this, printed out, double-sided. It's quite thick and impressive. So there's a lot of stuff there that we've developed, and it's been used so far at UOW, QUT, University of Manchester, and there's some other interest from around the world as well. These are split into 5 dimensions of culture we thought were relevant to engineering education. So living culture, workplace culture, which is particularly important, community culture, the interplay between technical and cultural demands, and also for staff and tutors, culture in the classroom and how to actually run these classes. So we wanted to develop these modules to be flexible so they could fit within existing constraints. So we think we've done that. You can split up modules, use them individually, use them as sets. There's ones that can be split into 1 or 2 hour classes, and they can be very easily modified with different case studies using the same class plan. So we've got this temporary website where we've put everything, so you can have a look at that if you want to look at it in more detail. And the final report for this project should be published shortly, which I can distribute if any of you want further information. The other thing we did through this project was at various points to identify what there was that we could capitalise on in developing intercultural competency, and what was going to get in the way in implementing new practices. So the really important thing we found that was something we would capitalise on was our people. If you look around the university, there's people from everywhere around the world with all different worldviews, different ways of working and different life experiences. And we've actually tried to incorporate a lot of them into the modules we've developed as case studies and workplace events. The other thing we can capitalise is diversity in our student cohort. So when you talk about Australian culture, if you take a drive all the way around Sydney, it's very difficult to come up with a single definition of what Australian culture is. So there's a lot of diversity that we've tried to develop the modules around among our students to capitalise on those. What's getting in the way? We hear this time and money, research, we've got to do all this, there's no time and money. Not so sure about that, because a lot of what we've done that we've found to be successful is simply taking an existing class, flipping it around, restructuring it and doing it differently, which doesn't cost a lot. And in the end, once you've done it once, it doesn't take any more time. It's really about the constraints we impose on ourselves rather than the reality. So that's our project in a nutshell.